Hello, my friends. Welcome to New Kids with a Shop, brought to you by the Rcade Comics, Collectibles, and Games, located in sunny Fort Wayne, Indiana. I am Matt Cade.
And I'm Craig Ray, and this is our origin story.
Every hero has an origin story, and this is Craig's.
Yeah, so in this episode, we're kind of going to discuss, how we individually got into comics, the age that it started, key milestones in that path towards just loving all things comics, pop culture, all of that. So I started collecting probably when I was around 8 years old. Started off with, I'll set it from the very beginning. I was living in Chatham, Illinois, which is a suburb of Springfield, Illinois. And I went to a couple shops in town. One of them, I believe, was Metropolis Comics, and that one was, well lit. They had a lot of stuff. It was cool. It was fine. But then we would, like everybody does, you go to all the stores in town and you see what they've got and you kind of feel out the vibe. But I ended up going to and arriving at a place called Action Comics. It wasn't as well lit. It wasn't as, clean or, corporate looking as far as like, oh, this belongs in a strip mall. You must adhere to the strip mall type of look and feel. And Action Comics was my home. I forget the name of the gentleman who owned the shop, but I can almost 100% give him all credit for me actually following through and becoming a comic lover. He would speak to me about, Wolverine and how hot he was in the early 90s and continuing through the 90s. And he introduced me to Amazing Spider-Man and, Batman and all the greats, all the superhero books. And so I started going to Action. I got a pull list there. And like I said, it felt like home. He would treat me the same way as he would treat somebody that walked in spending, $100, my teeny tiny little pull list. Books were like $1, $1.25, more if there was foil or die cut. That was the big money grab in the 90s.
$1.75.
$1.75. But it was fantastic. I mean, so I also, at the time, I was playing soccer in a league, and my friend, Matt Fulton, and he had his twin brother on the team, Steve Fulton as well, but Matt was the one that was into comics. And sleepovers at that age is I'd go over to his house or he'd come to my house, and we would each have enough money only to buy the books we had. But we would get together and swap books. And not unlike now where kids get together and they just look at their individual iPads next to each other. For me, it was looking at our comic books next to each other.
It doubled your library.
Right. Absolutely. So, but it was a lot of fun because, I would have read something first and I'd give it to him and I'd just be sitting there in anticipation. I'm like, well, and 10-year-old perspectives as far as that goes at that point. It was fun. So I'll fast forward a little bit, and I was going on a trip with my folks, and I got a comic book that changed everything and made me a lifer. I knew that it was done deal. Like, this is the medium for me. This is where all the great stories are told. This is how I want to feel after I experience something. And that book is this right here, which is Batman the Killing Joke. I read that in the back of my parents' car on our trip, and nothing was the same. It made me feel an incredible amount of depth. It wasn't like
It spoke to your soul.
It did. And it wasn't like I love the serialized format of comics, and I love the storytelling medium as far as how you can have a month where things, you can lay out a story and just add detail, but not a whole lot really has to go on. But this was like a one shot where it didn't take forever. I didn't have to wait for months or weeks to finish that story. It was all combined. And I already thought the Joker was interesting, but I didn't know how truly interesting he was until I read this book. It changed my view on Batman's relationship with the Joker, Joker's relationship with Batman, and my relationship with comics is what it comes down to. It was one of those things where it fundamentally changed me And from that point on, I was a Batman guy, a comics guy, and just an overall all-around nerd. So that is my origin story as far as the thing that kicked it all off and really got me into it. And I know yours is similar in the sense that it's Batman, but not exactly the same as far as how you got into it. So Matt, like if you want to explain how you initially got into comics and how it made that, impact on your life.
Well, mine didn't start with the book that changed my life or anything, or got me hardcore. Mine was, I remember, it was, I'm a little older than you, obviously. It was 79 or 80, and we were going to Florida for vacation. And we stopped at a truck stop in Valdosta, Georgia.
Okay.
And my dad, I was fidgeting in the car, whatever, it was a long ride. He showed me that they had a rack of comics there, and there was like it was like a Richie Rich book or whatever.
Do you remember that when you could buy comics anywhere?
Yes, it was awesome.
Still blows my mind.
I know, like the drugstore Hooks had a spinner rack or whatever. But I got that comic, and I still have it, and that kind of ignited something that I didn't really fan the flames on until later. But
What book was that? Do you remember that book?
it was
That you got
like
there?
Richie. It was one of the Richie Rich books.
Oh,
It's nothing significant.
Sure,
It was interesting, and it could help me pass the time.
A comic.
A comic.
There you go.
And then I went from there, and I graduated to like Spider-Man, like everybody does. And
Yep.
I was reading Spider-Man, and I like Spider-Man, but my parents had gotten divorced, and my dad. It's the only thing that I think that he's ever given me that was actually substantial or changed me, and it was this right here. Literally that. It was the Frank Miller collection of The Dark Knight with year one. He's got a Christmas story in the middle, but then it's The Dark Knight Returns, which The Dark Knight Returns.
So just for people, if you are interested, I believe Dark Knight Returns was in '86, and Longfellow Press put out this version of these three in this beautiful hardcover. It came out in like '89, I believe.
Yeah,
So
I was like 14
sure.
at the time, and I'd been reading Spider-Man and whatever else I get my hands on, X-Men, whatever.
Sure.
But I read that book, and it fundamentally changed something inside of me, because it was The Dark Knight Returns was an adult story, and it resonated within me. And from then, it was hard for me to read Spider-Man after that, because it's so lighthearted.
Yeah.
And The Dark Knight really showed me that there are adult stories or adult-oriented stories that can be told that and some of them, like Watchmen, at the time, they couldn't be told in any other format with the same
Sure.
amount of.
At least then, from a technology standpoint and all of that. But I wasn't actually going to ask a question about. So we're both very similar in the way that it kind of took an adult-themed book to get us into it. Like I don't think that's a requirement by any stretch of the imagination. But do you think that had that's a key element as far as our personalities and the way that
I do.
how we connect as far as like in the comic world? Do you think it's because we both like that feel?
Well, I do, and it's grown with me too, because I then went from there to Sandman.
Sure.
And then Watchmen, but the adult stories, they're not funny books. They're not
Right. Yeah.
newspaper comics. They actually had substance.
New York Times bestseller.
Yes, they tell stories that resonate with so many people, or resonated with me especially. Okay, so with books like Sandman and Watchmen, the Vertigo books especially, the DC books, I felt they were so much more mature than what Marvel was putting out at the time. And it's not a knock on Marvel at all. I felt like I was kind of growing out of the classic teen, source material.
And I think even at that point, before all the movies, before the MCU, all of that stuff going on, like to tie it back into origin stories, like at that point even, we had hashed over all the origin stories multiple times, or it's been, changed somewhat and that's for DC, that's for Marvel, that's for everybody. And I think the excitement of something completely new, but of same quality and adult oriented, it just made a connection.
It was not recycled. It
Right.
told, and especially Neil Gaiman. I mean, Gaiman, however you want to,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to do that.
Come on the show and tell us how you want us to pronounce your name, Neil.
Yeah, then I will say it correctly. But especially Neil, taking the archetypes of so many things, so many different religions, peoples, and putting them comic story form, that also kept me going. I mean, so after The Dark Knight Returns, I started reading like more and more Batman, and I felt stagnated for a while because I didn't feel like it had the same imprint or the same impression that The Dark Knight Returns did, until what was it? What is The Dark Knight? That's my fault.
No, you're fine. Who was the author on that one?
No, it's the DC. When they started, it was the Dark Knight series. It was.
Oh, okay, yeah.
What's it called? That's what I was fumbling with.
It's a long time ago, man.
I know.
Go ahead and look it up. But I was the same way. I mean, I was reading Batman and all of that, but it didn't have the same. I mean, it didn't take away my love, but I was like, why aren't there more books like this? And I read Batman, but
Legends of the Dark Knight.
Legends of the Dark Knight.
That is what. So I started getting those, and those felt more akin to The Dark Knight Returns.
Which coincidentally, they just did the Legends of the Dark Knight books this past year or so, and at the time, those were my favorite Batman books being written then. It was cool because it was just like vignettes and like shorter.
Yeah, like
stories.
three book arcs, and they had a darker tone to them. They had a more adult tone to them.
Yeah,
and so that carried me through the '90s. I didn't have the best home life, and my parents were divorced.
yeah.
My mom kicked me out when I was 15. I went to live with my dad, and he didn't really parent. He just coexisted with me in the same house. So
Sure.
I had no curfew. So I didn't mean to turn away, and I would still, if I would come across books, I would read them at night or whatever. But
Sure.
I turned into a hellion in high school.
I mean, when you have a choice between whatever you want to do with a car,
Yes.
or staying at home and reading comic books, it's not really a decision.
Well, I got, my first car, I had a 48 Chevy that I was fixing up, and then I blew the head gasket, and I sold that, and I had a 72 Duster that was my actual first car, and gas was less than $1 a gallon, and it was just my keys to freedom,
Yeah.
and it changed everything. And then the home life wasn't good. I joined the military when I was 17, and my mom had to sign me in, actually. And when I was in the service, it was also hard to read, but I would pick up trades when I could and read them.
They don't have a comic book shop on a submarine.
Well, there's no storage. That's the problem. Your lockers are very small.
Yeah.
And then when I got out of the military, I started tinkling again with comics, and I started reading again, and off and on, and college, and trying to finish college, and trying to work this or there. And I was like so many people. I went in and out of comic collecting or comic reading or whatever the passions you have, and then
It didn't stop me from what I think pretty much everybody has that same journey as far as like you start off young and you've got nothing to do and you want to spend your money on it, but then priorities change and things happen. I never stopped loving Batman. You never stopped loving Batman.
No.
It was just a matter of like, I've got a Batmobile now. I'm going to be mobile. I'm going to I'm going to get going and move around and do all that stuff.
But it was that magic 4-letter word, the BOOB word that, in high school that it felt more important than reading Batman.
Sure. I mean, Batman's got Selena. He understands.
Oh, he does.
So, yeah, I mean, I think everybody kind of goes through the same journey and stuff. So I think you and I even have that lined up where we kind of gone through 3 separate periods. It was like all my books when I was a kid, ish, and then I'm
middling
college,
books. Middling books when you're trying to figure your life or who you are, but you don't have money. So that puts a hold or puts a damper on a lot of that stuff.
And it's for the second time, and then the third time is like we're both more established, and it's been more consistent for the past 10 years or so, to where you could buy the books and it doesn't.
Yeah,
you're not making a decision between Batman and your rent. Right?
Well, exactly, because we had money then, and the book that got me back into it was an adaptation of I believe it's our favorite novel series, was the Dark Tower, the Gunslinger books.
Yes, sir.
And it was 2008. I had seen an ad for it somewhere that I luckily just came across because I was not reading comics. I was not going in stores.
Well, and I was so pumped that it was comics too, and I know they're attempting to do something now, or there's whispers of there being like 5 seasons and a couple movies or something, and I hope to God that it gets done. But
it was the backstory that they added to Roland's childhood that was really special. But anyway, in 2008, I went to a comic store the Wednesday that came out.
Yeah.
And then I have been back pretty much since then,
Yep.
to the point where it overgrew my house. Like
Yep.
it was just too much.
And that's yet another thing that we had in common was I had never met anybody else that had gone as far with Dark Tower as I had, because you were the only other person I had met. And luckily we didn't live in the same town, because you have the 1/100s, every single cover, every print. I have the 1/100s, every cover, every print. I was grabbing those at the time in Indianapolis. That's where I was living with my wife at the time. We were living there. And you were in Fort Wayne locally grabbing those up. So luckily there was no competition there.
Well, I mean, and I had just gotten divorced too, which helped me like refocus my attentions on things. And
Sure.
yeah, I was getting them here. I think I think for the first one they were 1 in 75s, were the pencil.
Yes.
Pencil.
The J. Lee pencils. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, Jay Lee, man, you are the man.
Yes.
Those
absolutely.
books are beautiful and they're so well told. And what I liked about those books was they added to the source material, but they added it went the right way, and it felt
Right.
organically like Stephen King was adding that stuff, which he might have.
Sure.
But they're great. But since then, yes, it's been pretty much, full speed ahead.
Absolutely. And actually, forgive me, everybody, but I also had one more thing I was going to show. So to go back to my childhood, and we'll move forward here in a second, but I actually forgot something, and I don't even know how that's possible because it's sitting here staring me in the face. But
Another Lee.
is so I was very, very much in love with, Jim Lee, Mark Silvestri, Todd McFarlane. McFarlane at the time, he had done that run of his own on Spider-Man when they did.
Yep, 1990
Spider-Man.
run.
Yep. Those books, X-Men one, which I want to show this because this is one of my pride and joys. This is one of the books I've actually kept from that time. This is the first book. I went to a con, and Jim Lee actually signed my X-Men #1, and I don't think there's another, 10 or 12-year-old on this planet that has taken better care of a possession. I mean,
There is still Jim Lee's DNA on those books. We could clone him in a couple years, I'm sure.
there you go. I mean, that right there, my friends, is a $4 book and a $400 signature. So
Like so many other books.
right, absolutely. So I just wanted to do a stop there. I think it would be cool to show the book and show that these books, as you can tell, the reason why we have these out is just because we've kept these books. It's made the impact that it has, and it's important.
And we're not alone. We know there are many of you out there that have done this or have done the same thing, or you do the same thing. And
We're currently pursuing finding that book again. If for unfortunate circumstances, like you had to get rid of it, whatever else.
your mom gave them to the neighbors, and your neighbors threw them away.
Right. That's another sad story for
a later
another
date.
time. But
So getting into so we can kind of wrap this up a little bit and tie it into how the store was created. I have daughters, and they're not really old enough to understand, or they don't really they don't care.
sure.
So my collection overgrew me, and I started to wonder how I was going to try to at least slim some of it down, because I didn't need 10,000 books anymore, and
Well,
I didn't need a lot of them.
It's every collector's struggle where you don't want to stop collecting. You don't want to.
Well, and you don't want to sell a book
And you
because
don't want to sell the book.
they'll make a movie of it next week. And this was, a couple years ago, but that was a real thing where you'd have a 99-cent book, and then all of a sudden there's a character.
Star Wars #1s were in the dollar bins
Literally.
all over the country, and then all of a sudden,
Now they're $500 books.
$100 book. Yes, sir.
So, but it was growing on, it was growing on me. It was weighing on my soul a little bit, and I decided that I was going to try with a friend of ours, a mutual friend, to go to a collectibles show and try to sell some books. And I did it the wrong way, and he did it the right way. He took 12 long boxes of dollar books, and he made a bunch of money that day. He made about $1,000. I took a bunch of really nice books, which everybody wanted to touch and finger and
Sure.
talk about, but no one wanted to even give me offers on until
It's like, come over here, look at this museum.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
Like, these are for sale if you want them.
I know. And then this man walks up.
Yes, sir.
He sees my Jenny Frison #1,
Something that's going to children.
which he did not have, which is one of the only ones he didn't have.
Yeah. So
But we had seen each other at stores, and we'd never really talked. And Brad was kind of the bridge between us. And Brad introduced us, and then
I don't want to embarrass or go too much into it, but I've told the story before, and I still think it's hilarious. The first time I actually remember seeing Matt in the store, like he had just had surgery or something, and he was walking around with this cane.
I'm a pimp.
Yeah, I was like, who the hell is this guy? Like he's like strolls in, like walking all funny, like he's in a potato sack race with someone else. And then, he talked. He was confident in his knowledge, and like you might be able to tell on the podcast, maybe not, but he was louder than everybody else. And I was like, man, who is this guy?
I'm very loud.
And
no apologies. I don't really,
So we didn't really chat up to that point. It was just one of those things where it was in passing because and this can lead into the store thing a little bit too, because the stores that we would, go into and
intersect
shop at,
or whatever,
and where we would happen to see each other. It's not like there were conversations going on where we could jump in and be like, oh, hey, I like.
They're very sterile. Other stores in town they felt very sterile.
Right. Like there was no organic conversations going on. I mean, there might be something happening as far as like if Disney Plus had just aired something, like a couple people might be talking about like.
But it'd be customers. It would never be the owners or the
right.
or the shopkeepers. Yes. But going back to the collectible show, so Craig comes up and I tell him, I say, hey, this is a very nice book. It's a 9.8, and he's been ribbing me since I told him that. He tells everybody, hey, it's a 9.8. It's a 9.8. Well, it was.
It was a 9.8. It was just very.
I knew it was. It was perfect. But so that led us into a conversation about Stray Dogs, which was at the time the hottest book besides Somebody's Killing the Children. And my dog that I'd had for 15 years had just passed. And I told him, I said, I couldn't find one of the blank covers because CGC was having a signing and sketching by Fleeks and Forrester. And I was looking for one, but it was like 3 days away. And he just had his, oh, hey, I got one. Let me go home and get it. But home wasn't like a minute away. Home was 20 miles away, which
yep.
he went, and then he came back. And then he brought it back as the show was finishing up, and we started talking, and we talked for a couple hours.
Yeah, out in the parking lot, my son was in the car waiting. I mean, that
you guys were on your way to get a brand new iPad for him because
he knew what he was getting into. I stopped. I was by myself when I came the first time. When I went home, yes, we were going to get a new iPad because his had broken or something like that, or something was going on. But he was excited because he had his money, and I'm like, yeah. I just need to drop this book off, and then we'll immediately head over to the store and we'll get that iPad.
A couple hours after immediately we're still talking, and then we said, hey, well, honestly, I would always throw people, hey, you want to start a comic store? Because that's always what the collectors want anyway.
That's the litmus test, right there.
And Craig is the first person that actually said yes, looked me in the eyes and said, yes, I would love to do that. Sounds fantastic. And we said, hey, let's have coffee or something. We can talk about it. And I just, at the time I was like, it's not going to lead to anything.
Well, sure.
I didn't know him at the time, but we started having coffee, and I think we had
started off talking about comic books, and then it started talking into strategies. And at that point,
but it was also there was a big chunk, and I'm not trying to disparage anything else, or anybody else. But we didn't feel, both of us felt it, we didn't feel at the time there was an actual old school comic store where anyone could go in and no nerddoms were, taboo.
Right.
And we didn't feel like there was that kind of place in town. And that was the spark that kind of started the fire, which ended up being the arcade.
Because I think we both were we were clearing out our Wednesday mornings in our separate lives and hoping to, it's new comic book day. If anybody's going to want to talk, if anybody's going to want to chat, if anybody's going to be excited, it's going to be on Wednesday morning.
Yep.
And then you get there early before the doors even open. You're like, you're just like, okay, it's new comic book day. It's new comic book day. And you get all excited. And then you'd go in there and you'd grab your books. And then you were like,
you feel unfulfilled because you wanted to have conversations about whatever Disney Plus had on, or whatever Marvel movie or DC movie, or whatever comic you were reading, you were waiting for that week. You wanted to share it with people.
Right.
And especially me, because at the time I was a stay-at-home dad.
Yeah.
My wife's a banker that allowed us to do that. And I used Wednesdays as my escape. And I would bring my
and that's important.
infant daughters with me, but I would want to talk to anybody and everybody.
Right.
And it was not, the stores we were going to, I wouldn't say it was frowned upon, but it was not encouraged at all.
Sure.
They wanted us in, paid, and out kind of thing.
Yeah. And
And so all these things, the stars aligned,
right.
and we decided let's do it. And even still, at the time, I was like, something's going to happen, something's going to fall through. It's too good to be true.
Right.
And it almost was, because the first building we looked at was an old attorney's office, which was very nice, but it was sectioned off into offices, and we would have to done a lot of work to make it a usable space.
For comic books. I mean, even having gaming areas and things like that, it was still very segmented. It wasn't.
It was literally a mile from Craig's house, though. So that was one of the things that was going to be great, was if we ever had a problem with alarm, or we had whatever, someone was almost
I'd get there before the police.
yeah,
Like,
someone was close by.
it was a nice like security blanket type thing because we were, because
We didn't know what to expect. We had no idea what we were doing. I have never ever worked in retail,
yeah,
and we had a lot. When on those coffee meetings, we would sit down and we would throw around so many ideas on what we wanted to do to make our comic book store the best store in the world, and we have implemented most of those in the store.
yeah, at least the free ones.
Yes,
It's
exactly. Especially the free ones.
especially the free ones.
But what we didn't know was we were talking to the broker, and the broker was not talking to the owner of the building, and the owner had sublet it to his cousin or something like that. So
It was I felt like it was gatekeeping because they didn't like the thought of having the business.
they thought they didn't believe in it, for one thing.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing they had there was like an attorney's office or something like that, and they're like, we're replacing it with a comic book store. Like, no, thank you. We'd like a lease for 10 years, and you're going to last 4 months.
We want someone with a lot of money to rent this place.
Right. So basically, with that, then
It fell through, and I was like, well, here, this is the beginning.
it.
This is
Yeah.
the beginning of the end, kind of, where everything kind of crumbles apart. But Craig,
So I was then, I had been looking through different locations, doing research as far as like population, the things that you do when you're trying to start up a business and figure out what your demographic is and all that. And, looking through pricing, all the things that come with, starting a new business, especially retail, because what's important is warm bodies walking through the door, the surrounding area as far as how many people that are actually interested in whatever product you're selling, and yada 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 yada. But
we thought we had when we had first started planning it, the building out by Craig's house wouldn't have been the best position in town for us. It was kind of far out on 24, which is it's almost outside of city limits. And we had originally said we'd love to have something either downtown or north central.
yes,
And we had started looking there's a major thoroughfare, Coliseum Boulevard, and we couldn't find anything there that was going to fit our.
but like many downtowns,
Yeah.
also like I was thinking about just myself. I'm like, if I want to go get comic books, I don't want to parallel park first or drive around the block 15
Yes.
times trying to
Find a spot.
find a spot. So
Or have to pay every time you go in. So that wasn't helpful either. And then Craig found this.
100-year-old firehouse.
It is a beautiful building, and we've been here over a year now, and I love it. It is.
The third partner.
It is, and it adds so much. It adds so much to what we are and who we are.
We've got a gaming area upstairs. For those of you that have been here, I think you
Understand.
understand, and for those that you don't, look at the pictures, and it only gets better from there because it doesn't really do it justice. Like, it feels.
We are upstairs right now, and the upstairs is fully furnished. We play games. We've rented it out for birthday parties, and we didn't know how, because we didn't want to split the retail space because you can't keep an eye on stuff. So we were trying to figure out the best way to utilize it, and we came upon gaming because we were just going to be a comics collectible store. Toys, Funko, comics, but we added the third dimension, which was gaming, and that has really been. We have met so many people that we wouldn't have if we hadn't have done that.
Yeah, Dungeons and Dragons, Warhammer, BattleTech, all kinds of stuff like that, and then
Board games, Magic, Pokemon,
absolutely
Yu-Gi-Oh. It's just yes, and it was great. We were going to sell cards anyway.
Sure, but having a spot to actually
Have tournaments and
and
have nights, it's great.
it's been fantastic, and I think that also everybody has agreed they felt the same way that we did when we walked through there, through the doors the first time. So when we came in, it was previously a 24-hour call center, and we walk in, and there was what 20 where our current sales
There was,
floor is.
I think there was 12 because there's 12
They
boxes.
were like double size.
Yeah.
They were like these giant like office, like cubicle type things, but freestanding desks, and then there is Ethernet ports.
Every 4 feet.
Every 4
in
or
the
5
floor.
feet.
And the back office was a tower, had a tower room.
Server room where they had everything all linked up and stuff. So
COVID killed it though.
yes.
They realized they could outsource it, either to let people stay at home. Anyway, the building was empty for about 14 months.
Yep.
And we couldn't, what they were asking for, this building, we couldn't probably afford, but we made them an offer that we thought was ridiculous. We thought there was just a bargaining point, and then they just took it.
Yep.
And that is the miracle day.
Yep. One of the most exciting things that happened, because that, I don't know how you felt. I don't even know if this is actually really cool, and I'm glad we're doing this, because at that point we just got to work, but we never really stopped and said, like, I haven't described how it made me feel. Like, I can't even tell you.
It's like walking into Disneyland. It's a magical place. We got the keys to this building on December 15th, 2021.
Yep. And I looked at the pictures. We had taken the tour, and awesome vibes and this and that. But on the day that we got the keys and things were actually done, it was completely surreal. It
was like the day that one of my children were born, or the day I got married. It was one of those magical days that, I wanted to skip around like a little girl, because it was just, I got the keys to a 100-year-old firehouse.
Yep. And
it's a beautiful place, and it's north central.
Yep.
Of the town. We have
wonderful neighborhood. It's in the
next door is this. It used to be, since I was a kid, there was a place called Nick's Rib Room, which had the best ribs in the town.
Yep.
It has changed hands a few times, but it is directly next door to us.
Same recipe though, because that gentleman's been along for the ride.
Yes, the ribs are fantastic.
Yep.
Now it's the
Village Tap.
Village Tap now.
Yep.
But the food is fantastic. On the other side of us, we have a Hispanic church and a tattoo parlor, which doesn't sound like it goes together, but it works or whatever. But the neighborhood lends itself so well. They have been so helpful. We have kids that live in the streets around here, come get Pokemon cards or Magic cards or whatever, but they're the neighbors we have.
Awesome community.
Yes, they show up for us. They all the time they're here.
Which we'll talk about exactly how much they showed up when we get to the part of, actually opening the doors.
Yes. So we got the keys on the 15th, and we sat down, and we didn't want to short ourselves, so we gave ourselves about 3 months. We set a target date of March 5th for the opening.
Yes.
That left us 3 months, and we were off to the races.
So it was divide and conquer at that point. I had dabbled in the legal side of things as far as establishing the company, getting all the tax and stuff set up, all of that. And then Matt pretty much scoured the entire Midwest for
all the fixtures
and things involved. So everything that you see in the store is because Matt got on the internet and negotiated a billion times with a billion different people as far as getting this stuff. Some of it was scary, but we were happy. Like, oh, here are these from a failed comic book store.
Which was,
yeah,
honestly, it felt weird, and I didn't know if it was foreboding or whatnot, but it was 3 different comic book stores that had closed during COVID that gave us the majority of our fixtures. And so that worried me off the bat. But literally the best game plan that we have enacted is everybody that comes to the door, we say hi, and we try to converse with them, find out what they like, what passions they have, what nerddoms they belong to, and that just being nice to everyone.
It's been a blessing.
We have grown exponentially, and it has been fantastic. But the 3 months that we had going into before we opened, we also split and divided the distributors that we were needing.
Yes.
Between Diamond, Lunar, Penguin, Alliance, so forth, Asmodee,
all the stuff
yes.
where we would get all of the
yes.
things that we needed to purchase.
And we only had really one headache there.
Well, Funko.
Well, Funko, yeah.
We didn't hear back until like the catalog was too late and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that took a while.
But we have other ways of ordering Funko at
Yes.
about the same price.
Yep.
So, but we had one distributor that was difficult, and they still are. And you guys probably can imagine or guess who they are. But we didn't know until it was like a week or two before we opened. Or
It was 3 days. We had the weekend to order via
Yeah.
spreadsheet if we were going to have anything for final order cutoff to arrive
Yes.
at store opening on March 5th.
So it was about 4 weeks and 3 days. So it took us a while. But so that came luckily. We had product when we opened the doors on the 5th,
Yes.
which leads us into literally one of the greatest days of my entire life. I'm talking about I'm putting that with my kids being born, and I talked about the keys being that great, but the keys were fun.
Well,
But
that time period, and I don't. So
We
the
were
kids
rewarded.
showing up. Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun times. Also, I mean, so if you remember, like the week before we opened up, the news came out, and I don't know how it was negotiated or whatever else, but I was on the news. I looked like crap, and I remember like one of my biggest regrets of starting everything out is they talked to me on the news, and I talked about it like it's a lot of hard work, everybody.
Because we were exhausted.
Yeah, I'm like, I hope somebody shows up.
Well, going back, like we went to, we got most of our comic racks because the only
Let's
problem.
talk about that. That was
let's
that
talk
was
about
actually kind of, looking back, it was fun. At the time, it was just cold, right?
Well, yeah, but like so, it is a 100-year-old firehouse. It is protected by the Historical Society. We cannot drill in or anchor anything into the walls. It's all the original brick, so everything has to be freestanding.
And downstairs, it's plaster on top of that, which we
Yes,
still can't
which
touch.
100-year-old plasters. We can't anchor anything or screw anything. So we had to use freestanding racks for the comics. And I found 3, and they were in Ohio. And what was the town's name?
It was. I don't. At this point, I don't even remember.
I could look it up. They had a really neat little comic book store though that gave us some
It was
really
like a
good
hobby
ideas.
store, and yeah,
And they had a bunch of gaming tables when you walk right in. But
Yep.
I borrowed
south of Columbus, somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I borrowed a truck that I had sold my friend Colton, who we'll talk about too, because he plays a part in this too. But we drove over there and we got hit with a blizzard.
Yep.
We got there and the racks were 6.5, 7 foot tall, and we couldn't get them in the back of the truck without. They were wood and they would have been ruined in the ride home. So we drove over there. It was like a 2-hour drive. We had to drive back. We were frustrated. We had to.
So we couldn't take the racks because of all
had to
the
leave 'em
weather took a
we
left
did-
turn, and we couldn't.
It was like 4 inches of snow we got that day. It was ridiculous.
It would have been that we strapped them on there unsafe,
And we could not
possibly
cover them.
slipping around, and then also all the elements going down on it. So it would have just accumulated moisture, and they would have expanded, or
Yeah.
whatever else would have happened, and it just was not a smart move. We didn't want to waste the gas, we didn't want to waste time, but it wasn't the smart play.
So we regrouped, and then we went back over. We rented a
legit rental truck.
a giant ass truck, and then we picked it up. But it was actually a really good. Looking back, it was like a bonding because we had 4 hours in the car. We had all day together to really finalize stuff because everything was snowballing at that point that we didn't have time to actually relax and talk to each other or enjoy each other's company like we had before. And
it was not chill at that point because we had so many splitting plates at that point.
we have 12 at the time. We had like 12 distributors. We were trying to argue and get stuff through, and it was just very, very stressful. But it was kind of fun going back over there. But then
So at that point, because I mean, for a more perspective, for those of you that know, or we were excited. One of our goals at some point was to have a store exclusive cover. Not like it's a huge. I mean, all it really takes is money and a little bit of planning. But we were, excited
But we got a book that we determined who the artist was. We paid the artist. We determined the direction of the cover. So we commissioned basically a piece of art, and then put on a comic. And then we were lucky enough that the creators agreed to come opening day.
So we can get to that and talk about it for opening day. But that was another thing that was also had to have been kept up with, because now we have not just a deadline. Before, if it had slipped, it's just that the store opens a week later or whatever, or what have you. Now we had commitments from the creators of the book that we were going to have a exclusive cover for. We're going to be there on March 5th. So now we have art that needs to be done within a time frame to go to printing. We have to make accommodations or figure out, having never opened our doors before, where we were going to place a creative team in the store. We have to align that with
setting up all the fixtures in the store so they made sense, and using the space we had to the best way possible, the best combination possible to get the most use out of the square footage we had.
Inventory for all of this thing, items,
Point of
creating
sale.
a point of sale system and making sure that everything's priced and put into there. I mean, looking back now, I have no idea because I mean, we had a lot of help from a lot of people and families. You know, we
Yes.
love you. You put up with a lot. You put up with a lot of hours. But as far as the actual work goes, Matt and I
Well, it was the weekend before.
90% of everything as far as the pricing, the building, the creation of the point
Yes.
of sale.
Collection of all the fixtures and putting them together and leveling them, blah, blah, blah. But it was a couple days before we opened, and
We still didn't have anywhere to put like our higher end Funko stuff or higher end collectibles. We've been trying to get DTOFs from IKEA for months.
they had been sold out for so long, and then all of a sudden they came available. Craig ran down there and got 6 of them, and we're putting 6 DTOFs together like 2 days or a day before we opened.
Yep.
And it was insane.
So, and then keeping in mind, I just throw it out there. I mean, you know, just for anybody else thinking about doing it, there's insurance. There's
More
utilities,
insurance, because
there's
we have to have more insurance.
Yep. We have separate policies for that stuff. There is trash and recycling. There's water. There's internet.
We had to
there's
get our
all the-
tax. We had to get a reseller certificate. We had to get our tax
Yep.
ID. There was so many things that go into this. And looking back, he could have done it himself, or I could have done it myself, but it would have taken twice as long, and it would have been 10 times as hard to try to just source all the materials and all the everything that it goes into opening the store.
We were up against time at that point.
Yes.
Because I mean, we had
squandered a little bit accidentally, but we also didn't know what the hell we were doing.
yes, which
It's you can't learn unless you do most things anyway. But it was sometimes it was frustrating. Most of the time we just did not know what the hell we were doing.
sure. I mean, it's an unfamiliar space as far as like, I hadn't considered until you get into it. Like I hadn't considered even, and it seems really, really dumb, but like in my previous, my other job experience and things like that, like I had never been in a spot where sales tax doesn't apply ever. I
Yeah.
mean, sales tax is always, I've always lived in
Yeah.
a state that had it and things like that, where sales tax is just a thing. I understood that like wholesalers and things like that, probably had something like that, but I had no idea what the process was to become that person.
Yeah.
What's the formal process to
Exactly.
where it's like, I am buying this from you. It's raw materials. And
And we didn't really find any helpful guides for anything, because we looked for, if there was any dummies of starting stores or anything that would set us on our way, and we didn't really find anything. There might be stuff out there for it, but we didn't come across it.
Yeah.
So we did everything by ourselves, alone in the dark, and we somehow pulled it together.
yeah,
And then opening day dawned on March 5th, which was a Saturday. On the way in, we got
someone was looking out for us. I don't
Yes.
know as far as whatever you believe in,
your family, your brother-in-law, your father-in-law, they helped so much.
tons of people. But I'm saying even from the weather perspective.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if you remember, like everything was terrible before that,
And it was a nice day.
and it was a beautiful day.
It was. We started the day with, we wanted to make it a big deal. We knew the news was coming again, because the news had been out earlier that week, and they'd run some spots on us, and then they were going to come out, and when we opened to
Kind of just like promotional things.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of a big deal. It's a cool neighborhood. It's a cool building.
yes, the
And
building
all
has been in the news many times before, just because of what it is. It's a 100-year-old firehouse, literally 100 years old now, and but the dawn of the opening day, we stopped. We were trying to also, sweeten the pot for people. We were trying to get as many people here as we could, because
Having no idea, starting from scratch.
and we
with
wanted
social media.
we wanted to share the building, and we knew it was special before we even opened.
Yeah.
And so on the way in, we got 10 dozen donuts for Tom's Donuts, which they're fantastic. And we started that day off. But we walked in, and we were setting stuff up, and families and friends were here helping us.
We didn't even actually. Before we went to Batman.
Oh yeah.
Let's not skip over that.
Oh my gosh. I
That's the
forgot
other
about
thing. That's the other thing that we.
The Batman came out the night before we opened, and we decided, hey, let's take the first 10 people with us that started a poll here, to show a little bit of, to thank them too. And then we took, our friends too. So the night before we opened, we're working until like 8 or 9 o'clock at night,
Yep.
and then
We go to like the 10 or 11 o'clock showing.
we did the
meaning,
stupidest thing we could.
Meaning
went
we
to,
didn't get out till like 3.
yeah,
or
I
whatever.
didn't get home until like 3 in the morning, and then I had to be back here at like 6:30 or 7.
Yep.
But we did. It is what it is, and we got back here, and then the day of the opening, like you said, it was a beautiful day. We got here. We had no idea if anyone was going to show up.
Because like around 8 o'clock, 8:30, we're still printing out prices on things, finding tags and things to associate with like the statues and all of
Organizing the cases, organizing the racks, trying to get everything just finalized, and
We opened at 10 o'clock that day instead of 11 for our normal hours. And around 9:30,
people started showing
a
up.
line started to form. And I was like, wow, is this like people are waiting? Like, well,
Yeah.
because the thing is,
I didn't feel like I didn't feel like I deserved it because just how I am, but I was flabbergasted, and it was an amazing feeling. And when we opened the door at 10, we had a line out the front of the building,
yep.
and from 10 o'clock until we closed at 7 o'clock that night. From 10 o'clock until about 5:30, there was barely standing room in the building.
So
The line of the register was 15, 20 people deep most of the
at
day.
all times, we had set up plans as far as what we were going to do for the day. Keeping in mind that the only people that knew how to run the register was Matt and I, and that was just practicing, like not any real world application at that point. It was just like, okay, hopefully credit cards. I mean, we had tested things like that here and there, but
Like once or twice, literally, because we didn't want to run a bunch or either of our credit cards through the
right. It's
system.
like we were
15
both
times.
extremely broke. We just started a comic book store.
Yes.
Anything, I don't make, oh, here, let me bring up this candy bar to make sure it works. Like, well, I don't even have that dollar,
Yeah.
right? So, and then,
So it was everything was, and going back, I had never worked in retail at all.
the plan got completely blown up. What ended up happening is Matt was stuck behind the register, and I was running
the floor.
back and forth all over the floor, trying to maintain customer service and help people find things. But then we also had the
creators,
teams.
the artists and the writers, and it was literally a magical day. We did 404 transactions on the
Yes.
point of sale system that day, but it was
And I tracked the distance. It was about 6 or 6.5 miles just from the time period in the store, which it didn't feel like it. It was it was euphoric.
it was literally like I was at Disney World, like when I was 10 years old. It was like it was fantastic. It was
And as an adult, those are
you never
far between.
You never get that
to get that.
No, you never get that satisfaction. You never get those rewards. And the opening day was, it was glorious. And then I don't drink.
Yeah.
And
I don't really either.
No, and if I do drink, it'll be one drink here and there with dinner or something. But,
Sure.
But we had a bottle of bamboo rum, and it was such a great day. I couldn't stop smiling.
Yeah.
And
That was before the alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then after the alcohol, I definitely couldn't stop smiling. It was a reward for all of our hard work and dedication. And then after that, and since then,
But also, I do want to interrupt right here just to
Yes.
say, going back to talking about the community showed up, like the
They
neighborhood in droves. And
Yes.
honestly, if you're listening to this right now, or if you're not, or if you know somebody who did,
Thank
thank
you.
Thank you. Because without people showing up and caring and supporting, our tiny little store that came from out of nowhere, we would not be here right now. Like
word of mouth has worked so well for us because, my friend or my family or my dad said, blah, 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 you sell Funko, you sell games, blah.
Also want to thank the news.
Yes.
We had a huge push
Yes.
from supporting. I mean,
5 or 6 months later, people were still, hey, I saw you on the news. I want to come in and check this place out.
yep.
So that was, and then on top of that, so this was Engine House 10 when it was in service with Fort Wayne, Indiana. It went out of service in 1999. It was a wreck, and the guys that we got it from, they beautified it and they perfected it. But it was Engine House 10, and the new Engine House 10, which is much, much bigger, they come every month, every other month, just to walk through, talk to us. It's really cool.
Yeah. So firefighters come through because it's a firehouse. We've had family members where their dad
or
was
their
stationed
uncles
here, or their uncles, or whoever else come
retired
through.
here.
And they remember it from 30 years ago when it was active, and it's just cool because
We give tours daily, multiple
Absolutely.
tours, because and we want to share the building because it's a beautiful and it's a living thing with us.
it just seems, going back to the fact that it was a couple different things, but the whole call center thing just seemed extremely, not that you can help it, but like seems selfish in a way, because
Yeah.
it's like it seems like this is begging for it to be a space.
We want to
open
share
the
this
public.
with everybody in the world.
Yes.
And when it was a call center, yes, it was open 24 hours, but it wasn't accessible for anyone
Right.
else. And the stars aligned.
Yep.
That's how we're here now. And I mean, yes, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of sweat. I broke my collarbone.
There's a lot of heavy lifting in pretty cold weather, and
Yeah.
it's like, but I look back at it now. I mean, it's not even like it was that far. But part of the reason also why we're doing this whole podcast is we're gonna keep this going. We're gonna chronicle the whole journey of things, and this is like, we've been wanting to do this for a while, and it's finally gotten to the point where with distribution and the weekly,
We finally caught up. We finally feel like we have a breathing moment. And then
to actually start this.
Yes.
This was part of this. This is part of the plan. This
was.
was one of the. This is one of the ideas during coffee shop talk.
And one of the reasons why this was negated for a while or was put off was because we wanted to ensure that our website had the best visibility and the best use that we could.
Yeah.
And Craig has been he was laboring 5 a.m. It's Craig's endeavor.
So, but yeah.
Craig,
Aw,
you can explain why.
So it's just
Craig,
comic books, and so it's not even standard retail. There's a lot of things that go into it, and I won't get it unless you guys leave a comment or whatever else. I don't know how deep you want to get into it, but like the barcodes even on comic books aren't the same as normal products. It's like there's a base barcode, and then you've got an extra however many digits that tells you the variants and things like that. And then so any point of sale system or any type of website or things like that, it's not really.
There's nothing you can use
designed-
out of the box.
Yeah, it's
you
not-
have to piece them together. And then once you do that, you have to back end everything. You have to manipulate stuff, and it's
Consistency.
Yes.
Like it wasn't a matter of pulling things up on the website that's a problem. The problem is that when I go to a website, especially comic books or something like that, as an example before, we had talked about, if Matt wants to look up Frank Miller, there should probably be a filter on there that'll let you look up
Frank Miller.
writer, an artist, Frank Miller. So you have to meta tag things like that and go through. It was just a process, and like everything else here, it's been a lot of fun, and I've got quite a bit of work done on it. It's just time consuming, but it's been.
That is perfectly explained on having a team member, having a team effort where we can split things like that, and I can use whatever wiles I have, and Craig uses his.
Yes. So, because that's the other thing too with a comic book store. I mean, the reality is, and the truth is it's a partnership, and there's not a ton of money in comic books and collectibles anyway. So you are splitting that, meager amount.
Which is the only. I mean, that is one of the only detractors that we've come across. But it doesn't matter because we don't do this because we want $1 billion.
Right. So
we do it because of the love of and the passion that we have.
So that's where I'm going with that is you may as well. You're not going to be rich. You're not going to have a yacht afterwards. So you may as well have a friend along for the ride and kind of weigh that out. It happened to be.
It's easier to share misery that way.
Absolutely. I mean,
It softens the blow.
it's like everything else. We're in a comic book store, but there are bad days, and it's nice to be able to not have that burden completely alone. And they're problem solving from a problem solving aspect. Matt's very good with his hands, and I'm very good with computers, and most of the time it works out.
Yeah.
And so,
And one of the other places that helps is one of us has to be here every day.
yeah.
We don't have a manager yet.
Yep.
And we're not at the point where we can quite afford that yet. But so one of us has to be here every day. And if it was just me working 7 days a week, I would have probably thrown myself
Tapped
off.
out.
I'd have climbed to the top. We actually have a tower here, by the way. I'd have climbed the top of the tower and just thrown myself off the side.
There's a lot of things, right? It's not all playing around.
It's not. There's no negative. We're joking. It's
like any job. A job is a job.
except it's not because we own it, and what we put into it is what we get out of it.
Yes.
But I mean, whatever I'm feeling, it's a magical thing. When I get here, my mood changes, my temper changes. I smile and I talk to every customer, and then we could, we could work 100 hours a week and it's still not exhausting. That's how I feel.
Because there's like this podcast, for instance.
Yeah.
We don't need to do it.
No.
It's extra.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work. There's a lot of things that go into like.
But it's rewarding to us too, because our hopes are that we get to talk to. We want, and our plans for the podcast are to put on as many creators,
yes,
and artists and writers and anybody else that we can. So we can, yes.
Where it's going to be, this isn't going to be strictly comics. There's going to be shows where we talk about Star Wars. There's going to be shows where we talk about Star Trek. There's all those things that tie into everything. And we're looking to chronicle our journey, and we're hoping that you guys come along.
But we also want you guys to tell us which directions you're interested in us going.
Absolutely.
What you want to know, what you want to learn about, or what you just want to hear us talk about.
So we can we can talk about that now. We can kind of lay it out as far as the plans for this, and not necessarily a deep dive, but kind of give some ideas that we have for this podcast ongoing. So like Matt had said just now, we have plans for creators. We already have some booked, TBD as far as like the time frames and things like that. We
want to surprise you a little bit with that.
Yeah, we want to surprise you with that, and we also want to get a few under our belt to where we feel more comfortable in front of the mic, and we feel more comfortable in front of the camera, and we can kind of work out the kinks before we embarrass ourselves.
Yeah.
And then we're planning on doing segments as far as like, let's say, and I'll just use as an example, Green Lantern. Let's say you're aware of Green Lantern, but
you want to know all
about Green Lantern. We plan on having shows where we break that down.
We want to talk about variants and how they're...
Yeah, just the industry.
The art itself is so beautiful sometimes, but on total, the overindulgence of that may be hurting the industry a little bit.
Yes, and I think we're seeing the effect
fatigue
of that
about that.
We're fatigue with that right now.
Variant fatigue. So,
we are going to have, another big important thing about this is like most of the time we love our community that we built here. We have some of the most knowledgeable people I've ever met.
And you're gonna meet them,
and you're gonna meet these people. They're gonna come on the show. They're gonna drop some knowledge. They're gonna hang out. They're friends of the show, perpetually. And what we're looking for here with the show is the feel of, no matter where you live, you may have a shop,
you may not
have a shop. We want this to feel like you were going into the comic book store, and that's your fix for the week. So that's gonna incorporate some things as far as like we're gonna work pretty hard to get like a standardized format for. We read these books and we kind of tell you how we feel about them, and we'll be honest about those books. We're not only going to talk about books we like. We'll talk about books we don't like. We'll tell you why we liked them, why we don't like them. But we're trying really hard not to be a spec show.
Yes, we're not, and we're also not going to disparage stuff just because we don't find it appealing or we don't like it.
Sure.
So, and that happens with the running of our store too. Like we push books that we love, and we have gotten so much good feedback from that because we've had people come in and they don't know where to start. And we kind of get the feelers out, and find out what we think they might like. And then we share with them what we think they will like based on how much we liked it.
And there's a genuine difference between I bought too many of this book and I love this book.
Yes.
And we both approach it from...
And there's also a difference between this book has beautiful art and this book has beautiful covers, but this book has no substance that we enjoy.
Yeah. So we are really, super excited to keep this thing going, and this is the spot where we're going to plug all the socials and things like that. Tell all of your friends if you're interested in the show, or if they know somebody who might be interested. You can find us at The Rcade on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We are The Rcade Comics and Collectibles. On there, we have a group on Facebook as well.
The Firehouse Group.
Yep. And then we also are going to be putting the videos on YouTube with the same name, The Rcade Comics and Collectibles on YouTube. Leave comments there. Leave comments on, the podcast is going to be hosted on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and where all the other popular spots where you listen to podcasts. I will also be embedding the link to our podcast on our website. If you are following us on our socials, you will not miss episodes because I promise you we are going to be pushing on it hard. We want to make sure that everybody hears this, and
we want it to be a comprehensive and we want it to be a comprehensive story of
where we're at and where we're going.
Yes, and how it's working out. So please, and I'm begging you, if you have a local comic book shop, support them because they're not doing as well as you think they are. Since COVID in general, I think the consensus is most people can order stuff either from Amazon or whatever other portal, and that is why we got all the fixtures we got, is because it hurt so many stores.
Yeah.
So if you can, go support your local comic shop in any way possible. You can support us we have shirts, we have our
website, www.thercade.com, and it is spelled RCADE.
Yes.
Which
hey, we also have we have our pull list benefits that we offer 20% off and free bags and boards, and we have pulls in South Carolina. Yep. We ship weekly. We can, if you don't have a shop and you need a shop, let us know. Give us a call. We'll help you any way we can.
We get all the books. We're also a Bad Idea destination store, so we have access to all the Bad Idea stuff as well.
Hopefully Dinesh will be here in person soon.
That'd be great if we just see how the fan cup works out, but that would be awesome. But I think that takes care of us for this week, and
we hope to see you soon.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.